Imagine the next time you go to quit alcohol addiction and you have little to no withdrawals. Is that even possible? Well, it is, with a radically different approach to the conventional approaches. Today I'm going to explain that. I've spent the last 25 years of my life immersed in the field of addiction, neuroscience, mind transformation, through 2 degrees, applied science and philosophy. I had a career in Chinese medicine for 15 years. I also been specialising in addiction recovery for 15 years. One of the most life-changing skills that I've learned is how to end alcohol addiction, in fact, any addiction, without withdrawals, with a radically new and different strategy. In this video, I'm going to be explaining to you why alcohol withdrawals occur in the first place and how to avoid withdrawals altogether. So let's first look at what withdrawals are, what alcohol withdrawals are. I'm going to divide it up into 3 categories: physical, mental, and emotional. So the physical withdrawal symptoms are inability to sleep, insomnia, nausea or tummy upsets, sweating, increased heart rate and blood pressure, and dehydration. And on a mental level, of course, you've got the mental cravings. You can have confusion, hallucinations even. And on an emotional level, you often have anxiety and this kind of agitation. So, but just explaining those symptoms as words really doesn't capture the suffering that occurs. And I'm sure many of you know that this is a continual battle that goes on for days, even weeks. So, and it involves this confusion, this agitation, irritability, the constant cravings, the mental battle, as well as all the physical symptoms. Not sleeping makes it even worse. So we need to, if we're going to understand how to not have all of this suffering when you quit alcohol, we need to understand the mechanisms behind what's creating these symptoms in the first place. What's creating all of this? So again, we'll look at this, like what causes withdrawals on a physical, mental and emotional level. So on a physical level, it's really about the imbalance that goes on in the brain. So in your brain, you've got what we call a neurotransmitter, which is a brain chemical that helps the neural pathways function by releasing a chemical that bridges a gap between 2 nerve cells. So that's a neurotransmitter, and a very important one is GABA. And this is responsible for, let's say, putting on the brakes. It's relaxing. It's kind of, we could say, inhibitory. It reduces anxiety. It's calming. So that's GABA being the foot on the brake. And then on the other side, we've got glutamate, which is more of an exciting, it's an upregulating. It creates excitement. It creates motor, in a sense, increased activity. So the brain normally regulates these two, like the brake pedal and the accelerator. You can think of it like that, in a really fine balance. But when we introduce alcohol basically, takes over what GABA does. It actually increases the impact of GABA. And so that means there's more of this sedentary experience, more of this relaxation. And so what ends up happening is that in order to compensate for this, the brain reduces the amount of GABA in the brain, and it increases the amount of glutamate. In other words, it reduces the amount of the brake because the alcohol is doing that job instead, and it increases the upregulation or the activity to counteract this this relaxation. So now, when you suddenly stop alcohol, which is what usually happens with most recovery programs, there's this sudden stop of alcohol. So because the brain's rebalanced in order to cope with alcohol, now alcohol's taken out of the picture, suddenly there's another massive imbalance where there's not enough GABA to keep things calm. So there's not enough ability to put the foot on the brake, and there's consequently too much glutamate, which means there's too much activity, which creates this kind of anxiety and the agitation. And so that's on a physical level of what's going on in the brain physically with the chemicals in the brain. On a mental level, I've mentioned the anxiety, but let's talk first of all about how that works, because your brain goes into fight or flight when this sudden imbalance occurs, and it really wants to change this suffering that's occurring, this agitation, this anxiety, and so it goes into an emergency situation, which is the fight or flight, and that's that counts for this this anxiety that occurs, and this agitation, because and it produces all the cravings as well, so that you really want to get that alcohol back in order to create the balance, in order to create this alcoholic mind balance that you've been living with. So a lot of the symptoms, like the confusion, the cravings, the hallucination, this is all part of this chemical imbalance. The insomnia, the nausea, the sweating, the increased heart rate. This is all about having too much, not enough down regulation, not enough calming. And on an emotional level, we've got the anxiety now, and this kind of agitation and even fear. I mean, so that's what causes the immediate symptoms of the withdrawals. But let's talk about now, how would you eliminate these withdrawals altogether? Well, remember I said that all of this really occurs because the alcohol's taken away all of the sudden. So with most programs, the advice is just to stop drinking. Now, there's a few problems with that. One is that you produce all of these withdrawal symptoms because the brain has suddenly got a massive imbalance, and a sudden stop will send the whole system into this chaotic emergency, and that's what mostly the withdrawals are. Now, if on the other hand you didn't stop suddenly, then the brain would have time to gradually regulate back to normal. There would be no sudden stop. There'd be no sudden symptoms. These hallucinations, insomnia, heart rate, blood pressure, high blood pressure, sweating, even the anxiety wouldn't be there. But of course, most systems and most people find it very, very hard to just gradually stop the alcohol. Why? Because remember I said that the alcohol takes over the job of GABA, which is the putting on of the brake. If you don't have enough of that, then you just don't feel normal. You just don't feel relaxed enough. You've got a little bit too much of this accelerator glutamate, and so you feel wired, and so you want to have the alcohol just to feel normal. Now, so this is why it's very, very hard for people without just by themselves using willpower to gradually wean themselves off alcohol. Now, there's another reason as well, and that is because simply taking away the alcohol isn't really going to solve the addiction, because the addiction essentially isn't about the alcohol. I know there's all these impacts chemically, and it seems like the alcohol's the problem, but if you take a bigger view, a wider view, you realize that underneath the alcohol is more of a mental, emotional wound or wounding, several, that there's a level of suffering that the alcohol came along at some point in your life to help cope with. Most people I speak to, when they tell me their story, I ask the question, how long has your drinking been at this level? And they'll take me back to 15 years ago or 6 years ago or 5 years ago or 3 years ago. And inevitably at that time, something traumatic occurred. Somebody died, a relationship broke up, there was maybe a change of career, some big life event occurred that caused a traumatic impact. And in order to cope with that traumatic impact, alcohol, the subconscious, started to use the alcohol to give that kind of sedentary, calming effect. And so simply taking away the alcohol without looking at that, how do we deal with this underlying wound, is also going to cause, this emotional anxiety or even depression, and it will send someone straight back to alcohol to cover it up again. So, of course, we just can't take away the alcohol suddenly. It produces the withdrawals, and it also exposes the wound, the wounding that hasn't healed underneath. Of course, there are some people who have healed that wound, and it's simply now the chemical imbalance that they need to deal with. Okay, but most people, there's more going on underneath, and a lot of people, there's a whole history of addiction that they've been associated with in their family or culture or friends or whatever. So we can't simply just wean ourselves off because there's a chemical dependence. And also we've got this underlying emotional situation that's also, driving you towards continuing alcohol. So what do? We know that weaning off is better. Know that having a hard stop is going to produce all of these withdrawals. So how do we get everything to slow down? Well, I've made quite a few videos that talk about this topic, but I will briefly overview some of the key points. Now, the reason, like I said, the reason why the alcohol is there is because the subconscious is trying to regulate the state of being. Now, what I mean by state of being is your emotional state and your mental state, how you actually feel, whether you feel happy and safe, essentially. So your subconscious is coming in and doing that, and your subconscious is doing that. Why? Because of fight or flight, or the other system, the reward system in the brain, that try and keep you either safe from harm, fight or flight, running away from danger or fighting it, or happy, let's say pleasure, the reward system. There's more information in other videos about that, but essentially this is driven subconsciously. The subconscious is designed to take over from the conscious mind. So conscious mind, just simply weaning yourself off, is going to be overpowered by the subconscious. So how do we deal with that? Well, we have to get the conscious and subconscious on the same page. We can't have, the conscious mind trying to reduce alcohol and the conscious mind trying to, keep it there. There'll be just this inner conflict. That's more suffering. Now, we have to get conscious and subconscious to work together. We have to get the subconscious to let go of the addiction voluntarily and let that happen naturally and slowly over time. Now, this can occur if you learn skills to access a deeper state that exists within you, a deeper state below the mental, emotional, results of the chemical imbalance, below the deeper traumatic wounding. Deeper within you, there is your more natural state, which is one of genuine peace and contentment. But very rarely do we get to access that consciously. We just don't know how. So, but there is a way you can learn skills to do that. And so once you learn those skills, what ends up happening is you can access this deeper state of okayness, and this this is in a sense resolves some of this deeper wounding. So your subconscious doesn't need to kind of use the alcohol to deal with this unresolved trauma or unresolved memories. So the subconscious will let go of the need for addiction because of that, you see. And because you start to experience the ability to consciously access this state of okayness within you, the subconscious also doesn't need so much the alcohol to regulate your ability to feel relaxed and okay, because your conscious mind is accessing this. So again, on that level, it starts to let go, and gradually, less and less alcohol is consumed, and the brain all the while is rebalancing the chemical imbalance in the brain. So you don't experience all of these, really strong withdrawal symptoms. I've had many clients go through this process. It does take time. Like I always say, it's not a quick fix, but it's a deep fix. And it's not even really just about the alcohol. It's actually resolving a lot of unresolved feelings, unresolved life issues, but not through, having to talk through all the gory details. It just happens quite automatically because you've realized that you're already okay. I know I'm talking in generalities because it's hard on a quick video to really, unpack all of this. But in my other videos, I am trying to unpack different elements of it. But what I'm saying is that there is another way other than the hard stop. It takes time. You do need to learn some skills, but it is very life-changing. Often people's life direction, their sense of meaning and purpose, get reawakened, and their enjoyment of life, just increases. Boredom kind of disappears. The ability to handle relationships and reconnecting with relationships and starting to do things in your life that you really, really enjoy. These are all parts of this mind transformation process. So essentially the answer is, if you don't want the withdrawals, don't stop the alcohol suddenly. Now, I'm not telling you not to stop alcohol. I'm just saying that there is another way other than doing it suddenly. Now, if some of you will be able to stop suddenly if you're drinking, a small amount and it hasn't been happening for very long. But for most people, I know it's been happening for decades. So, if you in a few months can end up stopping your addiction without withdrawals, compared to, 10, 20, 30, 40 years even, that's a very quick change. So anyway, I hope this helps you. And there is my free masterclass. There's a link in the description if you want to know more in detail about the 6 steps of this process and how this process works. And you can also go to the website and get started if you want. I look forward to helping you. All right, take care, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.